there, welcome back to Craftersations. Oh, things going good for you since last time? Yeah. If you don't have your craft, as always, I encourage you to pause, step away, grab what you need, and then sit. Even if it's something small, something simple. I'm currently working on the project that I referenced last time, the student who requested the marine symbol because of his advancement. So I finished my son's, and it's up in his room, so I don't have it to show. But if you go to my Instagram, there's probably pictures of it there. But yeah, so I'm marking it. I don't have anything impressive to show yet because I'm doing all the marking first because I want to do a multi-layer on it, so like folding the tabs to more than 2 levels. So I want to see how it marks up first, so I know where my design elements are. Not that you needed to know that. Anyway. So yeah, that's what I'm doing. If you're doing something you're excited about, drop the comments down below and let me see what you're doing. So I'm actually pretty excited today. My family is going to be going to get their passports done because we finally pulled the trigger on an Alaska cruise. So this was something that my husband and I wanted to do for, if not a honeymoon, an anniversary, something at some point, because it's something we've both wanted to do forever. And it just never happened. Work, and then kids, and then struggling with early relationship financing where you're like shuffling funds around, hoping that the paycheck comes in time to pay this or that bill. Yeah, Alaska cruises were not on a priority at that point, and we were willing to go into debt in order to make it happen. So we have finally gotten into a place where financially we can handle it, and where our kids are old enough, I think, to actually, this is going to be a significant memory for them, and they'll be able to enjoy it and understand, maybe a little bit of the sacrifice that went into making it happen. So anyway, we're flying back after the cruise is done out of Vancouver, Canada. So apparently some countries are, persnickety about how you travel across borders. So we got to get our passports and be all official. I've done cruises before, nothing like this. Like we went big on this one. It's like the full 10-day land and sea, and like if we're gonna go, we're gonna do it all. So this was definitely a splurge moment for us. But yeah, so we're flying back out of Vancouver, and like I said, I've done cruises. I've done short little ones out of like Southern California down to Baja, that kind of thing, with my family when I was younger. But my husband has never done anything like this, and my children have definitely never done anything like this. So it's kind of a big deal for my family. So that's what we're doing. And we're gonna go see Denali, which I'm really excited about. We're gonna go through Glacier Bay and see all the glaciers. Side note, I'm finding it really difficult to talk and mark measurements at the same time. This is not a multitask that my brain wants to accomplish well. Yeah. So I don't know, have you ever been on a cruise? Alaska cruise in particular? Got any tips you want to share with me? Pass along? One of my acquaintances that I see when I go out dancing, I line dance, by the way, he lived in Alaska for a while. And when I told him where we were going and when we were going, he's like, oh girl, invest in mosquito repellent. He's like, that's about the time of year that they tend to be out in full force. So he recommended what was, in his opinion, his preferred mosquito repellent. So we'll see how it goes. He's like, get everybody a bottle, because otherwise you're going to be mightily uncomfortable, especially if you're going inland. So yeah, drop your tips down if you've got any. If you've done the cruise and you're like, oh, make sure you do this, or don't bother doing that, let me know. But coincidentally, I'm listening to an audiobook called Crossings right now, and it's about road ecology. So basically how the building of roads through natural spaces affects the ecosystem dynamics of that space. You know, because we like to put roads everywhere. Even in the wildest of places, you're probably going to find a road. And the chapter that I just listened to happened to mention, it was about noise pollution. As you know, roads affect so much of the ecosystem. It's not just like physical pollution. It's not just the physical addition of the asphalt and then the movement of the cars. There's the noise element, right? And we think it's the engine, but really it's the tires on the road that create just so much background noise. And so one of the things that he mentioned in this chapter, it's not roads in a conventional sense, but it's sea lanes. The effect that ships have on ocean environments because of the noise, primarily. And so, of course, in my brain, I'm like, I want this cruise so badly, and I don't want it to be tainted by the knowledge of the negative impacts that this cruise is having on this amazing environment that we are so lucky to travel through. But, of course, the biologist or biology teacher and environmental science teacher in me is like, but shouldn't you know? Shouldn't you at least be aware? Because that's going to change, things, apparently. So yeah, that's floating around in the back of my mind. I'm going to enjoy the cruise, don't get me wrong. But sometimes the more you know, the more you live in that squishy gray area of life where it can't just be all good. It also doesn't have to be all bad. It's just gray and messy and complicated. And I had a similar conversation. Well, I have similar conversations with my students like this all the time. Because, teenagers, they want answers. They want to know how they're supposed to feel about topics. Because they want to be right. Because that's how we've trained our students nowadays. That's all that matters. Catch the heavy sarcasm there, by the way. So these conversations come up a lot, especially in my environmental science class. Like, they want to know, well, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Are humans good or bad? I mean, these are big questions. It comes up in my biology class too. Especially right now, we're talking about natural selection and how humans end up becoming a really big selective pressure on populations of everything. In fact, going back to roads, one of the case studies that I heard in this book was really fascinating, and it was about cliff swallows and how the addition of roads put pressure on the cliff swallow populations that lived in the area. And before the road was there, or at the start, like when the road was first added to the area, and I forget what state this was in, the cliff swallows in the area had a certain wingspan, and it was relatively long. It allowed them to do those kind of long, swooping, gliding motions because they're aerial predators. They're insectivores. They catch insects on the wing, and people were noticing there were just mass die-offs of cliff swallows getting hit by cars. Their bodies were just littering the roadway and the roadsides. And so, of course, biologists doing what they do, they decided to watch the area and count bodies and collect bodies and try to figure out why. Why were these extremely acrobatic aerial predators not able to avoid getting hit? You know, it's like you can see a semi-truck coming. Why can't they just get out of the way? And they noticed a really curious thing, that over time there were fewer and fewer cliff swallows getting hit. So, you know, the natural maybe assumption is, well, the populations are just crashing. We've killed so many cliff swallows in this area that the populations just can't recover. And the biologists quickly noted that the population count seemed fine. The cliff swallows were still there. They just weren't getting hit anymore. So when they compared that population of cliff swallows with the previous data they'd collected for the ones that were getting hit, so they would capture live cliff swallows and, you know, measure different metrics, and like I said, the wingspan was one of these metrics, and they noticed that the wingspan had shortened. So this new population of cliff swallows, the survivors essentially, had shorter wingspans than the cliff swallows that were getting hit. And what they figured is the shorter wingspan allowed them to turn faster, to change direction faster. So when they saw the cars coming, they could, in fact, turn and get out of the way. And so the pressure of these very fast moving vehicles were a selective pressure on this cliff swallow population, and it selected for the cliff swallows that had shorter wings and selected against the cliff swallows that had longer wings. And so the cliff swallows still survived. It was just the ones that survived because they could basically fly away from the cars. So anyways, this is one of the case studies. And so I had a student come up to me at the end of that particular class day when I shared this case study. And he's like, so, like, was this a good thing or a bad thing? I said, well, it was just a thing. The cliff swallows didn't disappear. Like, if the population had gone extinct, we probably could have said, well, it's potentially a bad thing. When you lose species, you lose biodiversity, and it leaves a gap in that particular ecosystem. So you could argue that the complete removal of the species is a bad thing, but the changing of a species, I mean, change happens all the time. Is it bad because we were the selective pressure that made it happen? I mean, that's more of a philosophical question. So, you know, as a teacher, I have to be careful with how I present opinion versus, like, what I know, because my students trust me. I make it a point to build good relationships with my kids. So if I say something, they take it seriously. And so I have to be really careful with what I'm presenting to them and how I present it. And so, of course, his next natural question is, I get this from my environmental students all the time, is, well, you know, then are we bad? And there's a lot of times, especially in environmental science, and I actually do have an issue with this, is things that are related to humans are considered unnatural. And things that are not related to humans are considered natural. And so one of the things I have to establish with my students is humans evolved here. We are one of the species on this planet, and we've done exceedingly well. If you just can step back and look at us as a species, we've done ridiculously well. We have managed to immigrate into almost every continent on the planet. Now, we can acknowledge that we've had good and bad effects on the environments we've moved into. But we were not placed in those environments. We were able to move into them because of our adaptations. If any other species did that, we wouldn't judge that as a bad thing. There are salamanders in California that are immigrating all the way down, what is the river? I forget what it is now, but they're basically immigrating south through the middle of California. They're following the conditions that they need to survive. Well, when those salamanders get to their southernmost point, wherever they end up stopping, Like, are we going to look disfavorably on them because they're in an area that they didn't start? No, the ones that could survive in those areas are simply living there and they're succeeding there. It doesn't make them bad. It also doesn't make them invasive. So we belong on this planet. We are natural to Earth. So why are the things that we do unnatural when they come naturally to us? Other organisms have grand effects on their environments. Elephants are bioengineers. Beavers are bioengineers. Like, when you put beavers back into an ecosystem, it completely transforms. We look at that and go, oh, that's amazing. That's how it's supposed to be. When we bioengineer space, we're like, oh no, that's not how it's supposed to be. Because humans are unnatural. It's like, okay. I think the difference is humans, we are conscious of the effect we have. And, we don't call parasites unnatural because they have a negative effect on their host. We don't call plants unnatural when they seep salts into the soil so that they can outcompete other plants who don't have a high salt tolerance, right? They're just successful. But for us, if we had those same types of effects, we would call them unnatural. But it's because we are aware. We're aware of the negative effects that we have on other species and on just the general processes that we believe ecosystems are supposed to follow. And so with awareness comes the obligation to mitigate the negative consequences, right? Like, that's something that other species, they just don't have. They don't have that awareness of, ooh, I probably shouldn't put as much salt in the soil here because the other plants aren't liking it. They're not able to grow here when I'm here. Or, I should take myself out of this environment because when I'm here, other organisms don't do so well. Other species don't think like that. But we do, and it makes us unique. And so does that make us good or bad? It just makes us us. So I try to kind of lay out those different pieces of information and the different perspectives to my students. And then I don't necessarily give them an answer. I don't tell them, oh yeah, we're all good. Or no, we're all bad. We just are. And we have effects on species and the environment like every other species on this planet does. We're just aware of it. So what do we do with that awareness? That's where we debate, and that's where we disagree. And that's that uncomfortable, gray, messy middle area where we're not good, we're not bad, we're also not unnatural. We just are. And I think part of the human experience is figuring out what we do with that awareness, which my students hate answers like that because they still have to kind of figure things out for themselves. So, but they're fun conversations. So, anyway, that went a long ways from an Alaska cruise, but that is where this conversation started. So anyway, negative consequences of us traveling through those natural spaces aside, I'm really excited about the cruise and to see things that I've never seen before and may never get a chance to see again. So I did not get much crafting done because, like I said, it is really hard to measure and talk. I hope you got something done while you were sitting here listening to me ramble on. And if not, I hope you enjoyed the conversation anyway. So thanks for hanging out, and until next time, happy crafting.